Well, good morning again, and back with you on Mirror Television. And from Normandy, here he is, Harry Atterton. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Keith. Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Well, a bit of turmoil in French politics as of yesterday.
Well, turmoil, yes, but it's a forerunner to what I think is going to happen in Britain in a few years' time. I think a certain complacency set in, and on the part of the traditional political parties that became detached from mainstream thinking and what the people really wanted. And this is what's happened, and I think it's about to happen in Britain. It looks like we're going to get a socialist government in England for the next 5 years. But depending on how they react to what the people really want, I think this support is very broad but very shallow. And with somebody like Farage waiting in the wings, you're going to have this identical thing happening in Britain in 5 years' time as we're seeing in France right now. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the French electoral process at the moment. And we're not likely to see, I don't think, my estimate, anyways, is a right-wing government coming in, because the Rassemblement National under Le Pen, Marine Le Pen, has said they will not accept responsibility for governing unless they have a majority. And what's happening at the moment is that the rest of the political parties are ganging up on them, throwing their own ambitions to one side, ganging up on them just simply to block them ever having a full majority. But it is a warning sign, and it shows that the people haven't been listening to. I mean, we had proof of that in spades when the Rust Belt, Middle America, wasn't listened to by the politicians. And along came Trump, a rabble rouser, and he got them all on his side by saying, let's make America great again. And it's when the politicians don't listen. And that's why the conservatives are being chased out now. And it's exactly why the socialists will be chased out in 5 years' time, because the support is very, very shallow for these people. Having change proposed, but what is that change? No details whatsoever are being divulged. So I think the British people, certainly no fools, they're going to look for results. And if those results aren't forthcoming and very, very quickly, they'll chase out the socialists just as quickly as they've chased out the conservatives.
Yes, Harry, just one point that you've made, and I've been giving our own media a bit of a bad time, is they keep on talking about Le Pen as far right. But in fact, she's actually modernized the party to being sort of center right, has she not?
Well, it couldn't be farther from the truth to say that she's far right. Now, her father, who started the party, he was something of an apologist for the Nazis, and yes, you could have described it as far right in those days. But she split with the father. I mean, they're still very close as a family, as members of the family, but she split with him categorically politically. And she's moved the party not only to the center, but almost to the center left, because it's become the workers' party in France. If you go into any pub and see where the workmen have finished their daily shift and they're there having a pint, they're solidly Le Pen. which begs the question, of course, is then what do the socialists do? Well, the socialists don't exist anymore in France. They have gone to a left-wing extreme. They're composed of Trotskyists, Islamists, absolutely doctrinaire communists, and they no longer represent the people. So Le Pen has become the People's Party, and it's a total misnomer to call it extreme right. There is an extreme right party in France. It's called Reconquête with Eric Zemmour, and they gained 0.7% of the votes yesterday in the first round of the French elections. French elections being a two-round affair as opposed to first past the post in Britain, and so that's an extreme, but 0.7%. Similarly, on the other side, the super extreme on the left only got 1.2% of the national plebiscite, and so this idea of giving labels extreme left and extreme right is absolute nonsense. That's just something conjured up, I think, by the press, irresponsible people like us, Keith.
Right. Harry, you say that the parties are ganging up. What does that mean in practical governance? Who is going to call the shots?
Well, the way it's done is that normally in France, the runoff in the second round of the election is between the two top contenders. But if you get a certain percentage of the vote, you can still keep your hat in the ring, throw your hat in the ring, keep it in the ring, and which makes it a triangular vote in different constituencies. So that means that the lesser parties can gang up on the big party by agreeing to pull out their candidate and just make sure that everybody votes against the big party. So you can very easily distort an election result through that second phase of voting that happens in France. It'll be on the 7th of July. That's next Sunday. So yes, it's quite easy to rig an election, and of course, the leaders of the parties themselves can call upon their constituents to vote, on the electors to vote a certain way, and they'll be listened to. The French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has already called for supporters of his party, in a case where they do not run a candidate, to vote for the extreme left. Can you imagine that? That's the president's party calling for them to vote for the extreme left. But there's a schism in that approach, because the Bruno Le Maire, who is the equivalent of Chancellor of the Exchequer in the French government, has softened that by saying, well, our members should vote against, our members being the presidential party, should vote against either extreme. So you'll get a division of the presidential vote, I think, some of which could go to Le Pen, some of which will go to the extreme left. But France, by nature, even though you've got this right-wing revolution going on at the moment, by nature, it's a left-wing country. It has been ever since the revolution. It's scarred still by the revolution. It's the center of politics in France is very much to the left, whereas in Britain, it's very much in the middle, and to America, very much to the right, the center line of politics. I think there's a very good chance that they will block the Rassemblement National from having an absolute majority, which is the condition that they demand in order to accept responsibility. Because if not, I can see why, because if not, Jordan Bardella, the young man who would become prime minister, would find himself any legislation that he tried to bring in, he'd find it blocked simply all the time, and he wouldn't be able to govern. So he needs to make sure that he's got a workable majority, however small, but a workable majority. It's possible. He needs 289 seats in the French Parliament to have a majority, and he's running probably at the moment on about 240. So he hasn't got far to go to take him over the top, but it depends how efficient the system of blocking is that on the part of the others.
Yeah. How many seats did Le Pen have?
507. Oh, how many diseases depend? Well, they're roughly headed to pull in at least 240, and they only need 289 for a majority. So if they can pull up a few more in the second round, it'll take them over the top, and they would have a majority. But as I said, it depends how efficiently the other people get their act together and throw roadblocks in the way.
I may have misunderstood you on that last one. It's Le Pen has got 240 at the moment.
She's running at that. She would have. I mean, she hasn't got them. Well, some people, yes. Some of her candidates have gone through already, because even in the first round, if you get more than 50% of the vote, you're automatically elected. There's no second round vote in that constituency. So she has got a number of MPs selected already, deputies as we call them here. But the final vote will not happen until next Sunday, and that's when we'll know definitively how many she's got. She has the potential at the moment of 240 seats out of the 289 that she needs to get the majority. So if she can pull up that extra few seats, she could make it. She could make it. And then we're going to have a very different political scene here. They have declared what their intentions are. One of their bandwagons is, of course, immigration and social care. They're going to be very generous with social care to native French people. They're going to reduce the retirement age back to what it was before, 62. But they're going to make sure that all of these people flooding in to France, just as they are into Britain, don't get these benefits until they've been there 5 years and have worked and have done all the things necessary to qualify them. Pretty much the same as the Australian system.
Right.
Now you've got to toughen up. And basically, many of the French policies of international relationships will remain the same. They'll continue to support Ukraine. They'll continue to support Israel. But I think there's the domestic program will certainly change the overly generous French system, which is costing the nation a fortune, and they can't afford to keep it up. And the same in Britain. What with triple locks in Britain. I don't think any government, Starmer or anybody else, can continue to maintain that without taxing the nation to death. And if he goes too hard on taxes, well, it's going to be the same story repeated once again. He'll be chased out of there. Even if gets a big majority this time, he'll only last one term.
Yeah,
the British people are getting edgy.
If Le Pen doesn't make it and says that she won't govern because she's not got 50%, who is likely to govern?
Well, it depends who the president then is invited to, is bound by the constitution to invite the runner-up to form a government. So he would have to call upon this new Front Populaire from the left, which is composed of an amazing combination of Trotskyists, Islamists, extremists, communists. I mean, there are people in there who declare openly that it is very wrong that people's liberty should be taken away from them for whatever reason. Therefore, all prisoners, murderers, anybody should be immediately released. I mean, some of the stuff they've got in their program is mind-boggling. So he would have to call upon these people to form a government, and the possible prime minister would be a guy called Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's a firebrand of the left with lots of crazy ideas, and he would become the prime minister, which is his ambition, of course. And so you'd get an ultra left-wing government in France, which would bring the nation to its knees. And of course, what would Le Pen do? They would then say, "Look, we were the majority. The wishes of the French people weren't listened to, and there would be literally a revolution. There would be riots in the streets. Already, the French are quite an undisciplined lot, and and if they get upset, they burn a few thousand cars just to give themselves something to do on a Saturday night. And but it would be absolute civil war, and so it's chaotic. So in a way, it's to be hoped that the so-called right-wing party, which I say now is the centrist party, very much the Workers' Party, does get its majority, does get a chance to govern, a chance to prove whether it's capable of governing well. You've always got to, you can't guarantee that they're going to do a good job. Their intentions, I think, are good. They're not extreme. They're middle of the road. Um, so it's, I think the safest way forward for France is if the Rassemblement National did win, scrape a small majority, and try to get a few of their programs into, on the board and see if they can get them working. France is going through a change, and as I say, this reflects, I feel, what's going to happen in Britain in 5 years' time. It's just simply ahead of the game. The French they're being Latins, they're much more emotional, and they react more quickly than the British. The British are rather a staid and solid lot. They're not too revolutionary, never have been. And once they do wake up, if you do wake up the British, they get pretty stroppy too, and so Starmer had better watch out. At the moment, it's anything but the Conservatives. They've got to get rid of the Conservatives. That's the guiding force in British politics. But by golly, I wouldn't like to be in Starmer's position if he listens to his extreme left and starts to do some of the strange things that the British people will not support, and he'll be chased out there in the same way in 5 years' time. That's my guess.
Do you think, looking at it from afar, that there could be? I mean, the Conservatives went through several leadership changes. Do you see Starmer staying as leader, or will some of his more radical supporters try to take over?
Well, I think already with Angela Rayner, we see that she is the representative of the extreme left. She is not necessarily that extreme herself, but she's the token person that keeps the extreme left of the Labour Party in check. And she is a much stronger personality than Keir Starmer. And I think he's more of a managerial type who will sit back and let other people run the show. Is he a Jeremy Corbyn in sheep's clothing? I'm not sure. But I think he's not a strong leader. And therefore, elements such as Angela Rayner, I think, will be given quite a lot of leeway, quite a lot of power, and may make or break the success of the Labour Party tenure.
Harry, I'm just going to let Liza in, Liza, who's just arrived. So could you just keep on with telling us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I missed the last question, but slight change of subject. Absolutely, viewers will recall that a couple of weeks ago I had a bad fall. I'm no longer 21 years old, and had a bad fall and tore my hand apart. And got excellent service from the French medical services. It's just outstanding. And I detailed that, I think, on a previous broadcast. And then since I've been home from the hospital, the nurses come in every other day just to check everything's okay and change the dressing on my hand. And today is the magic day when they're going to take out the stitches. So it's quite possible that while this show is going on, the pretty young nurse from the services group, hospital group that come around to people's homes individually, will be here to take my stitches out in front of the great British public. And I've got to get all my hands sorted out. So maybe we'll have that done. It'll be quite painless, I assure you. But it's another example of how good the French medical services are.
Yes, and I mean that's fascinating because it's also in keeping with Mirador's uh, purpose of involving us in life as it goes on around us. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
let's hope that that happens.
Well, there you go. You're there in broadcasting from a pub, and wonderful pub, Black Horse Pub. By golly, I wish I was there. And so you may see a little bit of the excellence of the French medical services in a minute.
Absolutely.
I don't know what she comes in, and I have to stretch my hand out like this. Well, you can't see, but stretch my hand out and have it sorted out while I'm on the air.
That's great.
And continue to try and say a few things slightly intelligent. See how
Well,
it goes.
let's hope that happens. Um, Harry, you alluded to our own election on Thursday. One of the interesting things I think is that Nigel Farage and Reform have been very, very quiet for during the last turmoil in politics. And now everybody is turning their ire on them and having a go at them. Do you think that shows that they are starting to be recognized as a force?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see the attacks now on Farage. They just secondly, they can get the slightest thing to pick him up on. He is accusing him now of being an apologist for Putin, and he didn't say that at all. He said that he warned the European Parliament in 2014 that the continued expansion would not trigger a reaction from the Russian bear, but would give an excuse to the Russian bear for reacting. We all know that the Russian bear has got territorial ambitions, trying to recreate the old Russian Empire, the Communist Empire. So it was only a question of him saying that gives him an excuse. But then that was translated by some very clever writers and politicians in Britain as if he was saying that our moves in that direction triggered the responses. He didn't say that at all. So the very fact that they're twisting such little things like that in an attempt to destroy Farage represents or indicates the fact that they're seen as a mortal danger, and he is. He's not going to get far this time. He's going to get a few seats this time. But as I say, reflecting what happened to Madame Le Pen and the Rassemblement National, she has tripled the number of votes she's got since the last election. I mean, it's amazing. It goes very quickly. Once the slides happens, everything that's happening to the Conservatives right now will happen just as quickly and to the Labour Party if they don't deliver, or if they overtax, or if they swing too much to the left, or what have you. And particularly if they spend these hundreds of billions of dollars on this net zero thing, which is just going to impoverish the nation, and to a degree at a time when I think a lot of people's eyes are being opened about this so-called global warming crisis. It's become a religion. It's become an ideology. But there's less and less proof, and there's more and more very learned voices speaking up against it. And we've seen the disaster in the waiting of the electric car. I mean, the electric car is going to fail. It's already failing. Sales are dropping through the floor, having problems with it. People who bought electric cars are swearing blind that they will never do it again. They'll go back to petrol or diesel, or at least hybrids. And none of the electric cars deliver on their promises in terms of range. The range anxiety, if you got an electric car and you wanted to drive from, I don't know, from London to Brighton, by the time you get to Brighton, you start to worry about how you're going to recharge. Um,
Exactly.
the average figure for range on electric cars is usually 2/3 of what the manufacturers claim it's capable of doing on average. And this is an official road motoring magazines are telling you these sorts of figures. It's just not an opinion I've got. It's getting to be widely known. It's a disaster. And the whole German economy is being wrecked by the fact that one of the fleuron of their industrial armory was the car industry, and that's going down the tubes. I mean, it's just no, it's just not going to work. This net zero nonsense has got to go, and you can't just cover the nation with a forest of whirligigs and expect it to generate electricity, and certainly not when the wind doesn't blow. Or the sun doesn't shine if you've got solar panels. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. And we've been listening to the Greta Thunbergs of this world, and as if they're the saintly emissaries from, I don't know, outer space, or probably funded by the Chinese who are trying to flog us all this stuff anyway. And no, it's going to come to an end. And if the Socialist Party gets behind that into a bit bigger degree, that will be their downfall, because the nation cannot afford it. The nation can't afford to pay the bills that it's faced right now without massive
Yes.
tax raises.
Yes.
And if you add on to that hundreds of billions of dollars, of pounds, and expenses on false net zero targets, it's a catastrophe in the making.
Yes.
But anyway, let them dig themselves in if that's what they want.
Yeah, the trouble really is that politicians are very sensitive to what the voter may do. And of course, one of the things that hit Sunak rather badly was that he okayed licenses for new North Sea oil exploration. Oh
Mhm.
my God! I mean, here's a man who is, tearing up the Bible.
Well, new licenses for North Sea oil. I mean, can you imagine anything more stupid? We've got the oil ourselves. We want to claim with it we're reducing our carbon footprint, and so we're now closing that down and buying the same oil and gas from abroad at twice the price, putting 260, I think, thousand British workers out of a job, and transferring our carbon footprint elsewhere in the world so we
Yes.
can look pretty good. I mean, can you think anything more stupid than closing down our own oil fields and then having to
Yes.
buy it at twice the price somewhere else and creating work and still creating as much, if not
Yes.
more, in carbon footprint, because you've got to transport that oil now back to Britain. I mean, just absolute stupidity. I mean, it's become an ideology, it's become a religion, and the sooner that stops, I won't live to see it. But
Well,
um,
I don't know whether, Harry, to some extent, we are, now that you and I are still alive, are seeing it. I mean, it's some of these protest groups, particularly the ones that pull down statues and so on and so forth. Uh, uh, a lot of people sort of say, "Oh, well, they've got the right idea. I just wish they weren't as violent." In other words, their mantra is got through. It's just their way of operating that people find, as you say, the British people are not naturally violent.
well, that's it. I mean, this you've got me on my obviously on my high horse here about global warming and all of this nonsense. I want a lot more proof than I'm getting at the moment, and I want to hear the voices, the conflicting voices heard. But those scientists are excluded from saying things. But to show you how silly it's all becoming, Denmark has just passed a law to tax farmers for cows farting. Uh, apparently a cow produces 6 tons of methane gas per year, and the farmers are being charged at 40, the equivalent of 40 pounds a ton for the cows. Now, I mean, they passed a new law, and just to be sure that they get everybody else into it, they've included pigs and sheep who obviously fart. I don't know when I don't know when we're going to be taxed for farting. As I get older, I become more prone to breaking wind, and I think my tax bill would go through the roof. But can you imagine anything more silly? And it's been a law that's been passed in Denmark. It's operational. It's 40 quid per ton of cow fart that the farmer has to pay. Now, if you translate that into France, France is an interesting situation. France, now let me see, some figures come out of my head here. There are 21 million cows in France. That's right. Yeah. 21 million cows in France. I think about 1/3 of them, roughly 6 to 7 million of them, are milk bearing cows, or milk raised to produce milk. And out of the 7 million milk cows, I think a good 2/3 of them are here in Normandy, where I live. So, if we were to tax cows farting in Normandy, it would be all in rags and would girt around our loins with sackcloth and sit in ashes for the rest of our lives, because we couldn't possibly afford it. I mean, the Norman economy would go down through the floor. So anyway, so I mean, that's how silly it's all getting, this global warming nonsense.
Well, the next thing would be is the government would spend a fortune on a campaign to say, "Don't take milk in your coffee." So it would go on. The idiocy would continue.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure what I'm saying is offending a few people, and it's not my intention to offend. It's just my intention to try and trigger some reaction, some rational thinking behind this global warming nonsense. The world is we know for a start that the world has always gone through fluctuations, up and down. We know that the world tilts on its axis as it goes around the sun. We know all sorts of things which are going to explain, why polar ice caps periodically melt and then freeze up again. There's so many scientific explanations to this that are not being heard. Now, if a proper debate is held and it does come out that that man's contribution to global warming is such a major factor that it needs to be controlled, fine. I'd change my point of view. I'd keep an open mind on that. But I haven't seen that debate. I've only heard the voices. I've only learned that the voices raised against global warming are silenced as quickly as they heard. There is not a proper debate going on it. It's just like, does God exist? I mean, it's purely in the belief in the person's ideology, I think, and won over people's minds, and particularly the minds of the young. So we're going to be stuck with this nonsense for at least another generation until reality.
Am I right in thinking, Harry, that the Danes are one of the governments that has started to move towards the right?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Right?
The Danes are a government that is starting to move towards the right.
In France, you're saying, or in Britain?
No, in Denmark.
In Denmark. Denmark has moved. It has a centre-left prime minister, but I think there is in the Nordic countries, which have been more social, left-leaning in their politics, are beginning to move not so much towards the right, but to the middle ground, to a more common sense approach. And we've seen how countries like Norway, which are just getting rich on the fact that we're offshoring our energy needs. The Norwegian sovereign wealth fund is now becoming almost entirely financed. No, I shouldn't say that. No, heavily financed by the Britain through refusal to exploit our own North Sea oil fields, and to allow fracking or anything like that. So, and so they're getting the right idea to look after their own economic interests, and they're going to do very well. And I think the same with all of the Nordic countries. They're prosperous countries. And they seem to be very well run. They've got very excellent social services, high quality of living, standard of living. I would say that they're finding the middle ground. That they're not at all extreme. It's just simply a curious thing that Denmark at this particular moment has passed this law.
Yes.
It's against all common sense, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, my point is some of this radical legislation likely to be negated in the near future?
Well, if it puts a lot of farmers out of business or pushes up the price of milk to unacceptable levels, yes, common sense will take over. But the way we talk about politicians listening to the people, they do when they want to get elected. But once they're elected, they seem to do what they want, which is what the big mistake the Conservatives have made. They haven't listened to their own constituents. But when reality bites home, then you get change, and that's when these people are chased out. So there's only so much the people will bear, and the people are getting very trust in politicians. I think has gone. We don't trust them anymore. We're about to have a Labour landslide, but there's no trust in them. We know that they've got a hidden agenda. Where there are going to be a lot of heavy taxes come in. We know that, and so already there's no trust there. It's just simply an anti-conservative vote.
Yes. Let's switch across the water to the apparently the Democrats have started a rally to say good old Joe Biden, whereas it's said that within the party they accept that he's now become a liability after his performance in the debate with Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they have a serious problem on their hands, the Democrats. They should have been aware of this at the time of the National Convention. But no, you've got to. I think he's firmly entrenched there, and his wife, Jill Biden, is supporting him. She's probably one of the only people that could influence him to step down, and she's doing the very opposite. She's pushing him to continue. She's telling him he's doing a wonderful job, and so I think they're pretty stuck with him. They can't throw him out, I don't think, under their constitution rules of the Democratic Party. He has to step down voluntarily, and we've seen the New York Times, which is traditionally a left-wing support journal, a newspaper. They've suggested he should step down, but then they've said, but if he doesn't step down, we'll support him 100%. And that's basically the problem. The people whose jobs all depend on Biden running, that clique of the power clique in the White House, they're supporting him, and because their jobs are at stake. So I don't think they're going to be able to get rid of him, or that they really want to get rid of him, which will pay a heavy price at the polls. It's a little bit reminiscent about Woodrow Wilson in the First World War, when he had a stroke. I think it was in 1917 he had a stroke, and his wife locked him in the bedroom And she was the only person that was talking to him. So that she was telling that, oh, my husband says we want to do this. My husband says we want to do that. She was telling to the people outside. So she was running the country. And was he saying this, or was he in a coma? There's a very, very strong argument that she was running the country, and that's exactly what is going to happen in the White House with Biden now a vegetable. Well, he's been a vegetable for a few years, I think. Is never very bright in the first place, but I mean, totally out is on in cloud cuckoo land now. So it's the people around him that are actually running the show. And he's not governing in the United States. So you've got the world's one remaining superpower, economically, militarily, with China coming up close behind, and it's being run by a clique in the White House. I don't think it's being run by Joe Biden. He couldn't find his way out of a paper bag. Very
so,
sad.
so there is a good chance that Trump will become president again. If you look at what's happened in France, what's happening in Britain, what's happening in Russia, and where do you see global politics shifting to in the next little while?
I think that Trump, now this is where we get onto very shaky ground here. I don't like Trump at all. I don't like the bombastic nature of him, the man, and all the rest of it. But he is so unpredictable and so dangerous that he is a threat to the other people who oppose our Western values. When he went to meet with the North Korean leader, I'm sure that the North Korean leader saw in him somebody just as dangerous as himself. I mean, unpredictable. He couldn't read the guy. I mean, he thought, I better not play around with this guy because he's got far bigger toys to play with than I've got. And he could take me out in 24 hours if he wanted to. He calmed down. But as soon as Biden gets in, the little rocket man starts shooting his toys all over the place and practicing and making belligerent noises and threatening South Korea. But Trump is absolutely unpredictable, and that's the last thing that these so-called tin pot dictators or real dictators like in Russia and China. They don't know how to deal with somebody like that. He's an unknown quantity. Somebody like Biden or the rest of them can read him like a book. But no, I think that the sheer uncertainty of Trump will hold some of these more adventurous dictators in check. Now, does that make me a Trump supporter? No. But do I believe the world will be a safer place with Trump in the White House? Yes. But, I mean, because Biden obviously is a danger. He's a weak and well, Biden doesn't exist. We've just gone through the argument that it's a clique of people around him that are pretty much running the show, and he's just a puppet. Is he even still alive, or has he got a motor in his back that makes his mouth move?
So, Harry, assessing everything that's happening at the moment and leaving out the football, how optimistic are you that everything is going to settle down again in a sort of year's time?
Oh, I think things will. Life is cyclical. It's part of human nature. Belligerency is part of the human condition, and so yes, we're going to have moments of grief, and there'll never be a war to end all wars. There's always a war going on somewhere, but I think we're just going through a bad patch. The biggest danger, I think, is economic. The countries have gotten themselves so indebted. I mean, France is now It's got a national debt which is 112%. A wealthy country like France, 112% of its national budget. You know, you're talking about several billion, thousands of billions of euros. It's massive. Their credit rating has been downgraded twice in recent months. So, if ever there was a true run on the French economy, I think that's a much greater danger. It would bring Europe down. Well, Europe is on the way out anyway. Europe has been pretty much a disaster. And there's another point to make, I think, and the stories being appear in the press about Starmer seeking to cozy back up to Europe to get a few benefits. Well, it's not going to get anything out of Europe because Europe is going down the tubes. Already Britain's growth under these terrible circumstances is superior to the European average. So don't know what it's going to get out of Europe. And its best bet is to not get itself shackled with the European laws again, but to try and trade with the rest of the world, and the rest of the world which is doing extremely well. Europe is a spent force. To a degree, Britain too. Europe is no longer the center of the world. The center of the world is somewhere in the middle of the South China Sea. We tend to think of Europe as, because certainly our generation, because we saw the last period of the twilight of greatness when we were young, but it's over. I mean, Europe is a spent force, and they're lazy. They don't produce anything anymore. They don't take their share of responsibility for world issues. I mean, they don't even pay their own share of defense in NATO, which is why if Trump gets back in, he's going to pull the pin on NATO. Because why should the American taxpayer be paying and footing the bill when the Europeans themselves don't spend money on very little money on defense? Germany, I mean, it's pathetic what they spend on defense. Britain is trying to pull its socks up a little bit. I think it's one of the few countries that spends the required 2%, talking about going up to 2.5%, but I don't think the socialists are going to do that. There's going to be probably a movement to do away with nuclear weapons if the extreme left has any influence. So I do not see any future for Europe, and I don't see any future, any interest for Britain in trying to cozy up to Europe.
Yeah. Harry, you touch on war. We still all tend to think, oh no, it'll never happen, we'll never go to war. But with the various things that are happening that you just described, do you think that we are right to be as concerned as some people are?
Well, we are at war. We're at war right now. There's a war happening on the European frontier between Russia and the West. We haven't got soldiers on the ground, or have we? I suspect we maybe have a few in there helping out in the back room, not perhaps in the front line. But we're already at war. We're supplying the weapons, we're supplying the material. We have realized that this is the beginning of an encroachment which will not stop at Ukraine, which will continue on into Poland, certainly the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia will go. In fact, Finland there's quite a serious possibility of encroachment by the Russians, and so this war is already happening. We just don't have troops on the front line ourselves, but we're very much at war right now, and it's a terrible thing to say, but the Ukrainians, civilians and soldiers, are paying the price. They're fighting for our freedom. And if they don't win, by golly, we'll soon find that we'll have to take up our trusty Lee Enfields and get back on the front line. We are at war right now. without any question about it.
Right, Harry, just before we end, what about the footy?
Well, I'm the last person to ask about the football because I believe in oval-shaped balls, as you do.
Yes, I know.
And but it seems that the blame game is already on. Southgate is being lambasted for not choosing the right players or the right tactics and what have you. But at the end of the day, it's who scores the most goals wins.
Yes.
Wins. And it was a close run thing with Slovakia, but they won. And if he continues to win, he'll be put back on his pedestal and he'll become a great hero. All of these overpaid pundits like Lineker and the rest of them, real bad news. These people, they're getting wealthy on being nasty to people.
Yes. And nowhere near as wise as we underpaid ones.
Yes, exactly. I mean, so I don't know. I think probably England is in there with a good chance. Did I not see that one of the top teams got knocked out there? Was it Italy? No, I don't know whether. I'm not sure. I haven't been following it too closely.
No, I don't follow it that closely. Just England, of course. But somebody was knocked out last night that wasn't expected to be. I think, yeah. So it could be all thrown up into the air.
It could be.
Yes.
Oh, it's all good fun, and it keeps. It allows people to express their frustrations, their nationalistic instincts, other than on the battlefield. Although, mind you, some of the things we hear about the sideshows on these events are quite violent. But I don't know. It's a little bit like Nero keeping the Romans quiet by slaughtering the Christians with lions in the Colosseum.
Thomas is here because Harry is expecting his nurse, and she hasn't turned up.
No, she
hasn't. So I'm going to give him a little thrill. Look into that camera, darling.
Yeah.
Because the next pretty lady that he likes is. And we will make sure that we alter this camera there.
There we go.
There she is.
Hello.
How are you doing, Harry?
Well, I was just saying to Keith that the lady nurse who comes round to the house under the French healthcare system every couple of days to check my hand.
You hurt your leg, didn't you?
She's going to come and take my stitches out in a minute, and I was thinking that might happen while I was on television. So we'll see how it works. But it's been an excellent experience. The quality of French medical care is superb, and it works very well.
Yes, I heard they were very good over there.
Yeah.
A friend of mine went over to Paris for a holiday and broke her hip, and she had the hip repaired over there. She said the service was brilliant.
Oh, it is. And I can't speak too highly of it. I mean, this is a minor injury. When I was in emergency with my hand, which is nothing bad, really, I saw people coming in with legs hanging off and what have you. But I mean, it's very well run. So exceptionally well run. And it's a mixture of private and public, and the right sort of a mix as well. And it would seem, from what I was able to observe, that most of the money is going into the front line. There's no huge bureaucracy behind it. The nurse that checked me in was the one that was doing my preliminary examination. And she's doing both things at the same time, so it was really quite impressive. Yeah. So no, I'm all for it. I'm a big believer.
Well, I'm really, really glad you're getting well.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. Anyway, I think it's time for me to leave you now. I shall prepare for the nurse coming.
Yes.
But
Pity we missed her.
hope we haven't offended too many people this morning.
Oh, I hope we have.
But
It's good for the ratings, Harry.
we're about to go through a major transition in Britain and a major transition in France. But it's unless the public in both countries get what they feel they should have, and that the politicians start listening to them, you get a same major change happening again in 5 years' time. So Starmer and company, be warned. I mean, the British are slow to anger, but once they're roused, they can be rather naughty.
Harry, we'll see you on Friday.
Okay, with pleasure. Back to you.
Okay. I hope the nurse treats you gently.
Okay, right.
Okay. Cheers, Harry. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, Harry. Bye bye.
Right. Now we're going to say toodle pip for a minute, and then we'll be back with Eliza.